As you may know, over the last couple of years, I've been buying a lot of cheaper LED lights from Amazon and other places. A lot of them are from Nicrew, but I've got a couple from HYGGER as well. And I thought it was a good time to actually do a post-review, like an update on a review in fact. And based on what's happened to these two lights in the last month, I thought now was a great time to do that video. If you're anything like me, you enjoy keeping fresh or saltwater aquariums, but you don't really enjoy the price of expensive LEDs like this fluval marine LED. Now, of course, expensive LEDs have lots of built-in features. This one, in fact, has Bluetooth functionality, can be programmed, and so on and so forth. However, the LEDs that I like to buy are cheaper ones, which still do a very similar job. You can see here on this marine tank that everything's looking pretty healthy, corals are loving the light, and the macroalgae and fish are enjoying themselves too. And the lights we have on here are both from Nicrew. I have done reviews separately on these lights. We have the Nicrew C10 plant light. You can see here the colour spectrum is pretty basic. You've got white, reds and blues. And when I did my submersion test, it did in fact leak, even though it said it was IP68, and we lost a few LEDs. Well, since that video, nothing has actually changed. The LEDs that broke are still broken, but the damage has not carried on down the chipboard of the LED. So it's still working fine. Obviously, most people would probably, if that happened by accident, you'd send it back, or you'd get a replacement if it had done it itself. But obviously, that was me doing it. In terms of everything else, though, I'm very pleased with the C10. I think it's a very good light. The price is a little bit higher than other Nicrew products, but in terms of growing plants, keeping corals alive, you can see beneath it here we've got a nice Kenya tree, we've got macroalgae and so on, and they're all very healthy beneath this Nicrew C10. So I think this would be a great light for your planted tank. Even after having it for I think a couple of months now, I'm still very pleased with it. The controller it comes with works very well. I have found that with the C10 it does have a slight memory on it, so if you get a little power cut it will resume, but anything longer than a couple of minutes you have to reset the time on it, but all your other settings remain on there. So I find it actually to be quite reliable in terms of the controller. The other light we have on here is the RGB+W from Nicrew. You can see it there, the 24/7. So this one we didn't do a submersion test because in the booklet it said do not submerge. I think there was a sticker on it as well. There we go, do not immerse in water. So we didn't dunk this one because it says not to, so all the LEDs work fine. None of them have blown out over the last however many months I've owned it. I think it's around 3 or 4, so still working totally fine. The dodgy wiring that we had there, I've just put some tape over it. So in my review there was some exposed wires, which again, if you had bought this yourself, I would have recommended you to send it back, but there we go, it still works. In terms of light quality, I prefer this one. I find this to be a little bit whiter and brighter than the C10. However, in terms of the spectrum it gives out and how it grows plants and corals and things, I think they're basically the same. I haven't noticed any real difference in output and how they actually do stuff in the aquarium in terms of growing plants. They're very, very similar. Aesthetically though, I think you might agree that this curved edge is a lot nicer than the C10. So if I was to pick one of these, I'd go for this one, the RGB+W 24/7, because it just looks a bit sleeker and neater. Obviously, you know, this one's a bit dirty, but compared to that, I think this looks the best. The controller is very similar in functionality to the C10, but it's a bit more old school. You can see the buttons aren't as nice. It hasn't got an illuminated back to it. The refresh rate is very similar to my camera, so you can't really see the time, but it's a similar sort of deal. You use the buttons and you set your timers and things. So it has the same functionality as the C10, but I think that controller actually looks nicer on the C10. But there we go. So that's those two. Both I still recommend, and both I think would do very well over either a freshwater or saltwater tank, as you can see here. So let's talk about my other Nicrew lights. And if you remember, when I did my Nicrew Aqualux review, I was absolutely blown away by these lights. I thought they were brilliant. In terms aesthetically, they're just like the RGB+W, nice rounded corners, nice and thin. The light output was really bright, better than an AquaSky, if I remember correctly. They weren't submergible. I did do the water test and we did get a leak. One of them lost a few LEDs, but like the other light I showed you earlier, it just kept on rocking, you know, it was fine. I kept using it for a long time. I think these lights, in fact, are probably, you know, 6 to 8 months old off the top of my head, so almost got a year out of them. Now, but you might notice they're both broken. So that's 2 of the same brand, 2 of the same model, Aqualux, broken. And it's very disappointing that these have both gone. And I'll tell you what's happened. I live in a very rural part of England, and when we get bad weather, we do get power cuts. We get trees and things on the line and it causes power cuts. Some of them last for seconds, some of them last for hours. Well, recently we had a bit of snow and it caused power cuts. Nothing unusual on my end, but it did make both of these lights die at exactly the same time. I've tried the power supplies, like on both of them. I've switched them over. I've tried a separate power supply that's on the same wattage and the same voltage, LED driver and so on and so forth, to see whether it was the light that was broken or whether it was the driver that was broken, and nothing I've done has brought these back to life. So something somewhere within the LED itself has just been killed by the power cuts, which is a real shame because none of my other lights have been affected by this. Yes, I had to reset the timers and so on. Even the fluval lights, they were all fine. All of my other LED lights and my tube lights, not affected at all by power cuts. For some reason, the NICREW Aqualux has a flaw in it. I don't know if it's like a lack of a surge protector or something, but then that being said, my plug sockets are surge protected, so I don't know why it would affect these so badly, but I wouldn't recommend the Aqualux anymore. I think this is off my list of things that I would recommend, based on the fact that it seems to be killed by something as simple and as common as a power cut. And now we're going to talk about my favourite light of all the ones I've reviewed, in that sort of £50 to £100 price bracket for a 4-foot light. I don't think you can actually beat the HYGGER brand, or HYGGER. Still don't know how to pronounce this brand properly, but this one is the 978. This light is absolutely tremendous. There are a few different sizes. Obviously this is the largest one, but for the price range, I think this blows all of the NICREW ones out of the water. Why do I say that? Well, firstly, the profile of it is great. It looks really quite professional and you wouldn't expect it to cost what it does. I found that the growth rate underneath this light has been really good. It's probably comparable to the NICREW ones, but I found that there's just slightly less hair algae under this one and everything just seems slightly greener and happier. I would say it's marginal, but personally I have noticed a slight difference. When I tested this versus its IP rating, it actually did meet its IP rating. It didn't let any water in. And the reason it did that is because the LEDs are actually coated in a layer of, I think it's silicone, so it stops the water getting in there at all, which is really good. The other lights from NICREW, they say they're IP68, but they're not. They don't actually, well, the ones I've had haven't been anyway, whereas this has been. So that's another benefit. The one thing that is a bit weird and a bit clunky on the HYGGER light is this timer. So you can set timers for it, but it has set amounts of time. You can't specify like 9:57 till 12:15, you know. So it is a bit clunkier. You have to be at your light at the certain times here, and then you press this button and you tell it what time it is, and then it runs through its you know, ramp up and on cycle and ramp down cycle. So the timer itself isn't the best, but I'm aware that there is a newer model of this. It's the 999, I think, and that has a very similar timer to the NICREW lights. So the newer version would be even better than the Nicrews. Absolutely smashes it out of the park. There's my secondary review of these lights. I hope it's been helpful. Basically not a lot of change in my opinions, other than the fact that I don't like these Aqualux anymore because I don't want to risk any more money on the fact that I'll get a power cut and they'll blow. But that being said, the other Nicrew lights have been absolutely spot on, and as I just talked about, that HYGGER one is definitely the one to buy.